Bonnet.
Happy days. Welcome to the Property Nomads Podcast. Good to be back in the UK after seven and a bit weeks away over in Mexico. And today's guest, we're going to have a great conversation. We're going to be talking a lot about economics, why he's not been purchasing in the last couple of years. But today's guest seems to do a bit of everything. TV selling, accomplished property developer, renovator, interior designer. He has a couple of lovely, adorable beagles. So if you hear anything in the background, then they want to get on to the show as well. Richard Black, a pleasure to speak to you today.
It's a joy to be here. I am astonished that you've just admitted you've had 7.5 weeks holiday. Is that what you've just said? Did I hear that right?
That's correct. I was away for 50 days, so 7
2
weeks
months.
in a day.
2 months. That's just, isn't that unlawful? I don't know. I mean, well done. You look great on it. And thank you for having me. Thank you for having me on the show. It's a joy to be here, as always.
No problem at all. I would say caveat, people that are listening to this wait to see me in my linen style Hawaiian style shirt. So that's why I'm wearing it. No, I have been away for a very long time. Content has still sort of gone out, which is great. We've been chatting off air, and we were saying with this podcast can go in a number of ways. We could talk about some of the great deals you've done developing here and there. But one thing that you said that you hadn't been doing for a couple of years was basically you haven't been buying anything. But before we get into that, is there anything I've missed out on the introduction? Anything you'd like to add to yourself at all?
Oh, blimey, what have I been doing? Crumbs. I started off life at school like the rest of us and wanted to go off and be an architect, and then decided that I didn't want to spend 7 years at university. I wanted to get out in the world and earn money and have a nice car and clothes and things like that. So I went off to my A-levels and failed them dismally, and went to the careers teacher and said I wanted to go into broadcasting, and she laughed at me and said I wasn't that kind of person. I should go off and do something more conventional. So I went to work in a bank. Hated it, but that's where I learned to manage money. And then I left and travelled around Australia I hated that job at that building society. I was very good at it, but I was rubbish. I went to travel around Australia, and I ended up working at Sky News in Australia. It had just launched. I mean, we're going back to about to year 2000. So that was when I got my bug for telly. And to sort of bridge a huge gap, I came back to the UK and ended up working in BBC Local Radio, then got a job at local ITV as a researcher. And then, because I had to go and work in London, I rented my little first-time buy in Norwich city centre out that I'd purchased for the whopping sum of £41,000. I know, those were the days. And went off to London to work for various production companies, and of course had to rent my apartment out. And all of a sudden started to realise, oh, do you know what? On a 41 grand mortgage, the mortgage payment was, I think, 160 quid at the time. It was negligible, really, in today's terms. And of course, I was renting it out for, £500-600 a month. So all of a sudden I became a landlord and realised, wow, I could really do this quite well. This is quite a lucrative way forward. I never thought. So I went off to Nottingham to work for ITV Central, and ended up, whilst there, buying another apartment in Norwich, hollowing out, what they call it, the money from the first apartment that was doing so well, and putting the deposit down on a second one. And then I bought one a year for about 10 years, and I always bought the rubbish ones. I always bought the ugly ducklings that that sat on the market for yonks because they were in a grotty area, or that really busy wallpaper, or bad carpets, or unusual odors creeping out of certain rooms, and nobody at that time would want to touch developments. We went through a phase back then when, I would say back then, it's about 15 years ago, when everybody wanted the perfectly done thing that Sarah Beanie was showing them on telly.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It was like, oh no, 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 I don't want to do any work. Oh God, no. Oh heavens, no. I don't want to get my hands dirty. I want a bathroom like that. So these development opportunities were quite fluid. Started off with apartments, ended up with a couple of terraced houses, Victorian terraces. Again, most of my development has been in East Anglia, where I live and have grown up and work. So again, I suppose by good fortune, the region has seen a huge boom, the sort of Towie of the world, as the sort of notoriety expands out of London and the money comes with it, and so areas like Suffolk and Norfolk always grew. Cities like Norwich, very safe place to live. There was always a demand. We've got a good number of big employers, Aviva and what have you. We had Virgin One and Virgin Money here as well. So there was always a huge demand for the properties that I did. I'm a good landlord. I like to say I'm a nice landlord. If it needs doing, I get it done. And again, I just want to say landlords get a lot of bad press. And I can remember having this conversation when I worked on BBC Breakfast, actually, at Television Centre. I was a producer there, and one of the reporters kept saying the word unscrupulous on her reports in front of the word landlord, and I had to pull her up and say, hang on a minute, not every landlord is out there, ripping the guts out of the poor tenant. In fact, I think I know I can count on one hand the number of bad landlords in 30 years I've come across. And I can count dozens and dozens of really good ones that care about their properties. So yes, I'm one of those big bad landlords and I install brand new windows and solar panels on my tenants' properties, and they get half price electricity, and I haven't put the rent up for 3 years, or anything like that. So, there's a completely different story there. But that was my journey into a property development. It was always a sideline to my broadcasting career. And then more recently, I left BBC Television in 2013, renovated 450-year-old, 500-year-old Suffolk cottage, top to bottom, re-thatch, re-plumb, rewire, everything. Grade 2 listed, and then moved out of that to build my own house here. And that completed in June 2020, and here I am. So over the last couple of years, going back to your first point, I haven't bought anything simply because of the aggression in the market. It feels inappropriate to me of late to start looking. It's not a buyer's market. I don't need to buy. It wouldn't be for me to live in. I've looked at a few development opportunities. I cover several on my podcast, HomeWork it's called, and they do look great opportunities. But to me, I've always made the best gains in times when the market has been troubled. Say just shortly after 2008, I bought my first flat in 1999, which was sort of shortly after the mid-90s recession. Buying now for me, I totally, again, and I covered countless stories of first-time buyers and people struggling with the housing ladder and grappling with it from the top end all the way through to the bottom on my podcast. If you've got to live in it, of course you've got to go out and buy a home at some stage. Right now, for me as a developer, not now. That's not to say I won't start tinkering with it in, I'd say, about a year's time. I've got a feeling we're in for a rough autumn and winter in the property market. And so at the moment, I've bought a place abroad. I've kind of gone completely mad, and I've done exactly what those people on A Place in the Sun on Channel 4 have told me to do, and I've raced off into Spain, and I bought a nice 2-bedroom villa on the eastern Costa del Sol. And I've just, speaking to you off air, just revealed that very kindly the Spanish version of Rightmove, which is called Idealista, has published an article today to say the village I'm purchasing in is one of the most sought after on the Costa del Sol. And I'm thinking, damn, there was me thinking I wanted a nice, quiet, restful retreat, a nice, tranquil hideaway. But instead, I'm going to end up with the Brits Abroad Brigade at the bottom of my driveway building concrete blocks. But that's fine. I'm not hurt or upset by that at all.
Brilliant. I don't even know where to start.
Where do you unpick all of that mess? I know. So that is my property journey, Rob. That is my property journey, and I duck and dive, and I wheel and deal, and I do my best, and end up doing my worst. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of points I take from that, Richard, because where obviously podcast host as well, you speak to an abundance of people that are getting started in property, or they've got a few properties, etc., and likewise here, and they seem to almost come across two sets of people. One set of people seem to have full-time job already on the go, quite a bit of disposable income, might have some cash in the bank or other assets here and there, and they just want to get started, or they might, like yourself, as in get accidentally started due to job relocation or whatever. And then sort of the other sort of set of people are people that want to turn property into a full-time job as quickly as they can, and got a couple of quid to the name but not much, and they want to get started. I always find that it can bring a slightly different approach. Neither is right, neither is wrong. Both have got advantages, but what I find from both sets of people, and it's similar to something you've touched upon, is you bought your first one in 1999. That's the time of record. That's 20 plus years. Property is a very, very long term game. Whether you want to get rich or you want to get wealthy, it don't happen quickly.
Not get rich quick, no way. And yeah, the aggression in the marketplace, and estate agents of all kinds will tell you at the moment that, oh, this house has gone up in value £200,000 in the last 2 years or whatever. I was featured on an article in a magazine on Yahoo Finance a couple of weeks ago where the value of my own home had gone up £400,000 in 2 years. So that sounds like it's a get rich quick machine, but it sounds absurd, but it isn't. It's this slow. Property generally tends to double in value every decade, was the sort of rule that seems to push about in the industry. And then there is about 4 years of settled stagnation, almost a more flatlining of the market, and then it drifts up. And that's quite simply because there was always a demand on a finite resource that is land and property in the British Isles. It's the sort of, I was told years ago, get into property because God ain't making any more, because there is no more land to be had. We all kind of want our little bit, and the more of us there are, the less there is to be had. So there's always that excessive demand on it. But it feels for me at the moment, it's get rich quick right now, but I personally have a genuine well-found feeling this is going to go pop soon. It can't continue in the way it feels like it is. We are running out of resources, aren't we? I don't know, where is all this money coming from to buy these houses at significant, what I call overpricing.
It's good point, valid point, something I wholeheartedly agree with. From myself, when we looked at when this sort of these lockdowns or whatever started a couple of years ago. Funny enough, I'd just come back from Mexico then as well. I think I've been back about 3 days, and then it was, no one's allowed to leave, etc. So, like most people, I had quite a bit of spare time on my hands, and it's very, could have gone out and I picked up a new habit like smoking more, or drinking more, or whatever. But I started going, looking at more economics, taking that time to re-educate myself, retrain myself, etc. Started reading and looking at a lot more stuff on YouTube about precious metals, history of currency, that sort of stuff. And what concerns me, this is what I'm seeing now, and I've said this on other podcasts, I've said this on the Property Nomads podcast, that this virus or whatever either came out of nowhere or it's planned, whatever it is, it's there. But the way that the world's responded to it, macroeconomically, print, giving all this currency out to a bunch of people. So they've increased the currency supply, not actually done anything to increase the level of goods and services within said economy. And then you wonder why you've got inflation. I mean, a 3-year-old can tell you that if you restrict currencies or increase the currency supply, but the level of goods and services remain the same, a 3-year-old could tell you that the price is going to go up. But it seems like the only people that don't know are the Bank of England, the government, and the Federal Reserve and politicians, which, surprise, surprise. So I'm not overly surprised that we have a big bunch of inflation, and I'm not overly surprised that all these prices keep going. Again, turn this over to housing. I'm not surprised that's going up and up and up and up and up.
Mm-hmm.
But you get to this situation, like you said, and we've had different conversations, my business partner and I, with different people. I err on the side of caution more than most. I like to go down the rabbit hole. I like to be contrarian. Anyway, point being, if you look at the history of currency and the history of true money, gold and silver, etc., the Romans started devaluing their currency, and the Greeks started devaluing their currency by making it not purely gold, silver based. Well, that screwed up Athens back in the day. The Romans done the same. I think Diocletian, something like that. So that's happened. Oh, let me think, that happened in 1929 as well. Gold going one way, currency going another way. Oh, the Weimar Republic, 1930s Germany. Well, we know what happened there. It's scary, scary stuff. History is almost repeating itself. It never repeats itself 100%. I think it doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. Mark Twain says something along those lines.
It's cyclical, isn't it? It does loop round, and there are so many, and I don't want to get into a political debate, please, because people will be. I don't know how to steer off that one.
Yeah.
To me, it feels like everything being purchased at the moment is borrowed. And that is an extraordinarily dangerous set of circumstances to get yourself in. On my podcast, I've got a first-time buyer pair, and believe me, they're solicitors I trained with. I'm a trained solicitor, and I went to university, and when I finished at the BBC and did 3 years, and I met this lovely couple who are still together. They're in their early, sort of late 20s now, and they're first-time buyers. They still haven't bought their own place, and they're both solicitors on 50x, if not more, per year each. So they've got a joint income of over £100,000, and their first-time buy, they're looking in the region of £500,000. I think the lifetime ISA cap for their mortgage borrowing is at £450,000 for the purchase. I am beside myself that at just under 30 years old, somebody is going to saddle themselves with a £400,000 mortgage. That leaves me, and they're just one set of people. They're very fortunate because, yes, they've got good incomes. They've got letters after their name. They're in an industry which is known for providing good, relatively good salaries. What that does lower down the market, should I say, or to lower earners, it exposes people to huge sums of money of borrowing that we just have got no genuine, well-found ability to pay back, have we? I don't know, because the trouble is the system at the moment of lending is based on the situation we see. The underwriters, I guess, in mortgage companies and what have you, only look at it right now. They can only go on the set of kit of parts they've got in front of you. So, okay, Mr. Black, you earn X amount. our criteria is 4.5 times X amount, and we can lend you Y. But the trouble is, that's on an interest rate, say, I don't know, 2.5% right now, on a fixed rate for 5 years. Well, what happens at the end of that 5 years when I've got my £500,000 mortgage that I've been paying off interest only, because to pay at repayment is huge, and rates in 5 years' time are not going to be where they are now. They're going to be 2, 3, 4, 5% higher. Well, even 1% on £500,000 is £5,000 a year. So you're starting. So if it goes up 2%, you're going to be paying £10,000 a year more, which is £2,000 a month basically for your mortgage. Find me £2,000 a month. I don't deny I'm not a man of means, but if somebody said to me, "Oh, by the way, your mortgage is going to go up £2,000 a month next from Christmas, after Christmas," I'd be like, "Oh, hang on a minute, I'm gonna have to sell a dog, or hack off a valuable limb or two," and that is where I am fearful we are headed. We are headed into this. We've become so normalized at borrowing. I could pick up the phone right now or go online right now and find myself. I reckon I could find myself about £100,000 in the space of what, 5 minutes? Just click through these, these online loan companies, even sort of brand names like Tesco loans, or all the way through to the ones you see advertised on the television or whatever, the sort of high APR jobbies. People. We have comparison sites that tell us, oh, if you want to borrow 25 grand, go to this organization because they're great and they'll give you a free hamper or whatever. We've just become so normalized at borrowing. And that feeds to me into your point about the currency thing, because there is only so much of this resource that is money about. There must be, surely, or alternatively, if we are churning it out as we're using it, are we not in a situation where eventually we devalue it ourselves and we're peddling our own life into an expensive world? Do you see what I'm saying? Because we're cheapening the value of our pound in our hand, we need to work harder to buy more of these pounds to buy our furniture and our homes. And where do we go with that? I don't know. And surely that can't carry on, can it? Am I being a little bit far too off to the left liberal? I don't know.
I agree. It's scary. It's concerning, and this is why I always say I've got to be in my bonnet with people that don't understand basic economics with regards to the housing market. And I mean that from first-time buyers all the way up to investors, people that do what you do, people that do what I do. I'm not saying I'm perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not saying that. I'm not positioning myself as, Rob the economics guru. I'm not saying any of that. What I'm saying is there's a lot of shit on the horizon, and it's going to hurt a lot of people. It's going to hit very quickly. You need to have assets under. You need to have proper, good, hard assets under your belt. Have what you've got. You've got multiple income streams. Multiple qualifications as well. Got your rental portfolio. Aaron and myself, we've got our rental portfolio. I've got a bunch of other stuff on the side as well. But you go back to the cost of borrowing. I read, and again, whether this is right or wrong. For example, just go into crypto a second. People that have borrowed on high margin or taken loans from credit cards, etc., to go in and buy Bitcoin and Ethereum or whatever. Now, I'll hold my hands up. I have a very small position in Bitcoin and Ethereum. It's a very small percentage of total net worth. So I'm not, when it works, it works. If it doesn't work, which is a bit at the moment, fine. I'm not losing sleep. I'm okay. I'm covered in other areas. Fine. But you read stories about people that, like you just say, go and get these loans from wherever, piss it on Bitcoin, and next thing you know, because the value goes down, they're on margin, they're up crap creek very quick. That's stupidity. I can't get into the mentality of why people would do that. And house values as well, going on to your other point, is, again, it's okay to sit around with a crystal ball. And, in general, when there is a nice little bit of inflation, because the Bank of England likes 2% a year in general, prices will double roughly every 10. Fine, I get that. You look at the house price data, it's a given, absolutely. But the point that I think you make, which is one I agree with, is if you take this lovely first-time couple that are going to buy a £500,000 house with a £400,000 mortgage, if it's fixed for 5 years or whatever. Now, when the market goes peak, Tom, which it will, let's just say that house is valued at £400,000 in 5 years' time, and they've got a £400,000 mortgage. People like you and I that look at a pure investment, there's always opportunity in the market. We're here to help. We've got some tools in the arsenal to help. But I'm totally with you on that actually the price might not be £400,000 in 5 years' time. It might be 600. I don't know. If you look at the economics of where we are at the moment and what's going on, I wouldn't like my chances too much, to be honest with you, Richard.
There is no investment without risk. That's what I say in my columns that I write for Property Investor Today and Landlord Today. There's never any investment without risk, of course, and that goes from something tangible like property all the way down to something intangible like, I don't know, shares in Aviva or whatever. So as long as you as an investor or as somebody with some money in a bank account somewhere is stepping in to those investments with wide open eyes and fully informed, then the buck stops with you.
Yeah.
I think the difficulty is with things now. Buying a house now is not like buying a new coat, but people treat it like it's buying a new coat. I've seen a lot of comment in the property industry, people like Russell Quirk, who ran Quirk's estate agents in Essex, and he's a very good commentator. I love Russell to bits. He says the buying mechanism in the UK is so transient. We turn up, we look at a house for 8 minutes, and we buy, and we've just spent a six-figure sum of money in the space of less than quarter of an hour. And then for the next 3 months, our solicitor will beaver away and do all the due diligence. And then all of a sudden it's payout time, and hurrah, we've completed and we're in our lovely new house. But on that 3-month journey, it allows for flaky people, and that's causing a huge problem, because I know an estate agent, I'm sponsored by one, that will quite clearly tell me they have several fall throughs at the moment every day. I was with him a couple of weeks ago, and he said, I've had 4 fall throughs on a Monday. That's never happened. And it's because people are realizing that actually, last week I offered X amount of money for a house, and it was lovely, and my wife fell in love with it and all the rest of it, and we're bringing back the tape measure and the 3 kids, for a second viewing. And actually we thought about it over the weekend, and guess what? We can't afford it. We have to be transparent with ourselves. We can't afford it, so we're going to withdraw. And that's where I start to see the market unwinding a little. I see this. Like I say, we think these things are a new coat. It's like, I see that on the shelf, I'll have that. I try it on, it looks lovely, away I go. And this buying a house is not buying a new coat. It is a huge investment. It's a long-term thing, and it isn't get rich quick. And there are shocks and surprises on the horizon. And that needs to be thought about, and that's what frustrates me about. And there's a lot of comment about first-time buyers again in the market. How does first-time buyer get on the market at the moment? And my argument is, do you know what? My first house, my first apartment, that 41 grand crock of rubbish, was a crock of rubbish. It was a top floor, 1-bedroomed ex-council flat in a grotty suburb of a city centre, overlooked by 2 concrete skyscrapers that were the old city hospital that were built in the 70s. This place was not an attractive concept. This was not what you see in Laura Ashley magazines. And you know what I mean? And But I had to kind of look. At that time, I was on 13 grand a year. Um, I wasn't taking home £1,000 a month, and that was for a full-time job at a very well-known broadcaster, and as a researcher. So, I had to take those compromises. It wasn't in the finest postcode in the city. It wasn't, it was. I can remember my first complaint to the freeholder was that somebody had defecated in the communal hallway. It wasn't a dog; it was a human. So that was how bad. But those are the compromises as a first-time buyer you have to make, and you can't sail in like a galleon, saying, "I want my kitchen with chrome handles and gloss surfaces, and I want my bathroom with dripping in decadence and swimming in splendor, and I want my bedrooms to all be doubles, and I want a home office in the garden." Because again, have we fed into, and it's a question for you, Rob, because you clearly interview more people than I do, are we in this situation where I want, and a generation at the moment are a very I want generation? And it's been bred, and that's where we are with houses. I want because I've seen those ones on the telly, those made in Chelsea ones, or those Towie ones, or those look at that villa in Love Island, isn't it gorgeous? And I want all of that. But sometimes you have to sit back and think, do you know what, I've got to pay for it? And that's always the second question rather than the first one, from my point of view.
I mean, it's interesting, and the reason I say that is I was listening to a couple of podcasts the other night, and they were talking about financial advisors, and they were saying that these people were saying that if you want a really good financial advisor at the moment, they need to have at least 44 years experience in the market. And I said, well, why is that? I said, well, last time there were serious inflation issues was the end of the 70s.
Yeah.
And these people know. They know how to deal with that.
Navigate it. Yeah.
And navigate it. We have, most of us at the moment have no clue. But this is why I love to emphasize the point of, go back. History does rhyme for a very good reason. Look at all the crap that's gone down in the 70s. Iran oil, Iraq oil, yada, 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 yada. What happened then? And it was pretty much a pain in the ass for the decade. We might have the same issue in the next 10 years. I don't know. I'm not an economical forecaster. All I do know is from a pure property point of view, it's going to create a lot of advantages. In answer to your question about Gen Z and this and that, yeah, I'm not against that sort of stuff, but we are in a very I want society. I think we probably will be for quite a while. That's got advantages, that's got disadvantages. At the end of the day, finance is important, economics is important, and you've got to be able to, you've got to at least be able to do a budget, and surely you've got to be able to run a budget. It's not difficult to do.
I learned in that job at that building society that I hated back in the day. I learned how to manage money. I hated the job, but it taught me a huge lesson, and I've never been overdrawn in my life. It doesn't matter, I'm 47 years old next week. I've never been overdrawn in my life, because I'm determined not to spend money I don't have. And if I haven't got it, I won't go out like a crazy fool, and or if I need it, I'll go out and earn it. How does that relate these days? I don't know. I just find there's a very cosmetic and material approach to things at the moment, which is difficult because deep down, I think, as you say, we are going to be in quite a deep and meaningful economic shock over the next 12 months. And I don't know how. I had an estate agent, a different brand, on the podcast, and the young lad, he was great. He was a really lovely guy. Set up his own estate agency, but he was 29 years old. And I said, "So you never experienced firsthand 2008, the crash, where people would rather burn than ever buy a house. Houses were not selling. I bought a house in 2010 for 122,000, sold it a year later for over $250,000 because that was how desperate people were to sell. I said, how are you going to navigate it if there is a crash? And he said, oh, no, I know what I'm doing. Da, da, da. I'm thinking, part of me wanted to say, you've never been there. You can't. I don't want to sound like a doom and gloom merchant, but what goes up must come down. That's the saying that I'm terrified that this is going to come across as a negative broadcast, because it isn't, because I love property, I love progression, I love development of all kinds. I bought a house, buying a property overseas. That's risky. I'm playing with a completely different currency and completely different legal system.
Yeah.
But it just feels like at the moment we are sailing like a galleon into a storm, the ferocity of which we have got no clue as to how big and problematic it's going to be. And the factors involved alongside that are conflict beyond Eastern Europe and famines in Africa. Again, we're still fighting off COVID across the planet. Global warming, climate change. There are bigger issues influencing our financial markets than there ever have been before. And again, we're scared of what we don't know. I'm scared of what I don't know. Mm-hmm. It's a natural human reaction. And I don't know what I don't know. And I'm held out to be an expert in all of this.
Yeah, bless you. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, we could go on for a very long time about it. All I would say, I'm just conscious of the time there, Richard. What I would say, we haven't intended for this to be doom and gloom, but if we're being realistic, as we have to be, in terms of property life and business, then that is a situation we're in, and it is a bit doomy and gloomy. It is what it is. All I would say to people: budget, prepare, look at history, understand what's going on, understand what will probably happen. Richard, just before we let you go, you mentioned a few times your podcast and bits and bobs. If people want to contact you, find out more about yourself, how do people do that?
My website is richardblack.co.uk, or of course the podcast is called HomeWork. That's home:work. And have a look on our website at thehomework.co.uk, or of course look us up on the social media channel, all the usuals.
Perfect stuff. And as always, we will put all that information into the show notes as well. Richard, it's been a thoroughly entertaining conversation. We'll have to get you on again at some point and chat other topics.
Likewise, and you're welcome to join on HomeWork. Be glad to have you.
All the best. Cheers, Richard.
Take care. Thank you.